I knew Thanksgiving would be uncomfortable, but I didn't expect my father to look me dead in the eyes right in front of the entire family and say, "Haley, if you can't get your life together, maybe you should go live in the streets." He didn't whisper it. He didn't soften it. He didn't even blink. My sister hid a smirk behind her wineglass. My mother adjusted the napkins like she could fold the shame away, and everyone waited for me to break. But I didn't. I just smiled. Because none of them knew the truth. They didn't know I built 2 companies from scratch. They didn't know I earned $25 million last year. They didn't know I had already stopped needing anything from them long ago. I stood up, smoothed my coat, and walked out of that house quietly. 3 weeks later, they walked into mine. If someone had taken a picture of my family on Thanksgiving, just one single photo, they would have captured everything we wanted the world to believe. A polished dining table, golden candles, autumn garlands draped perfectly, and 5 people smiling like life had never touched them harshly. But pictures lie. And my family lived inside a lie so long they forgot it wasn't real. My name is Haley Monroe. 31 years old. Founder of 2 automation startups. Owner of 3 properties. A woman who built her life from nothing but grit and late-night dreams. But to my parents, I was still the girl who never lived up to her potential. The girl they spoke about with sighs, not sentences. My father, Thomas, ruled the household with expectations carved in stone. My mother, Evelyn, upheld them with practiced grace. Together, they crafted a world where everything had to look perfect, even if it meant breaking me to keep the illusion alive. My younger sister, Lily, was the centerpiece of that illusion. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect life. If she tripped, they blamed the floor. If I tripped, they blamed me. I lost count of the times I overheard my mother whispering to guests, "Lily is destined for something special." Haley? Oh, she's independent. She explores. Explores. As if my entire career was a gap year I refused to end. The truth is, I stopped needing their validation a long time ago. But children, no matter how old, remember the shape of the wounds their parents carve into them. And I remembered mine clearly. Growing up, I was the kid who preferred the garage to the living room. I'd take apart radios, computers, entire appliances if no one stopped me. At 12, I hacked together a functional home automation system using scrap parts. My dad unplugged it and said, "Cute hobby, now do something real." I learned early that I wasn't what they wanted, but I hadn't learned until Thanksgiving that I wasn't anything to them at all. As I sat at the far end of the table that night, barely within the warm glow of the chandelier, I watched the conversation circle around Lily like orbiting planets. "Your boutique looks stunning, sweetheart. The expansion will be wonderful. You've always had such talent." Meanwhile, my mother glanced at me only to pass the cranberry sauce. Then my father cleared his throat, leaned back in his chair, and looked directly at me. His gaze was heavy, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "So, Haley," he said, voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter, "still drifting around? Still trying to figure out what you're doing with your life?" The room fell quiet. Lily sipped her wine. My mother adjusted a napkin like she could arrange the discomfort away. I opened my mouth, but my father wasn't done. "Honestly, if you can't get your life together, maybe you should go live in the streets." He didn't blink. He didn't hesitate. He didn't care. And for the first time, I didn't feel pain. I felt clarity, pure, icy, crystalline clarity. They had never seen me. They never intended to. So I stood, smoothed my coat, and said quietly, "Thank you for dinner." I walked out of that perfect, staged home and into the cold November air, not realizing yet that walking away was the moment everything started changing. 3 weeks later, they would walk into my world. 3 days after Thanksgiving, the silence in my penthouse felt heavier than usual. Austin's skyline stretched across the windows, neat, bright, alive, while I moved through my home like someone drifting between 2 worlds. In one world, I was a CEO preparing for a product launch. In the other, I was the daughter my family pretended didn't exist. I was making tea when my phone buzzed. Chloe, my cousin, the only person in the family who had ever defended me, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, in the way that counts. I wiped my hands and opened her message. "Chloe. Haley, are you okay?" "Me. I'm fine." "Why?" "Chloe. Because your mom has been talking." My stomach tightened, not from fear, but from a kind of exhausted anticipation. Talking. In my family, talking always translated to rewriting the truth. Me, what did she say now? A long pause. Then, Chloe. She told everyone at church that your businesses failed, that you're basically homeless, that you're sleeping on friends' couches until you figure yourself out. I froze. Homeless, failed, couch hopping. They didn't just insult me, they crafted a story. A narrative so vivid they could almost believe it themselves. I walked toward the window, staring out at the penthouse I renovated with my own earnings. The custom-built shelves, the imported marble counters, the panoramic view of the city I built my life in. Homeless. I laughed. Quietly. Bitterly. Me. I own 3 properties, Chloe. Chloe. I know. But they don't want to know. That sentence hit me like a blow I didn't expect. They don't want to know. Not they don't know. Not they misunderstood. But they don't want to know. Because knowing would force them to confront the truth, that the daughter they dismissed outperformed every expectation they had for their perfect one, that their golden child wasn't the one succeeding, that their scapegoat wasn't failing, and that terrified them more than any truth ever could. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass. Me. What else did they say? Chloe hesitated. Chloe. Your dad said he's worried you might cling to them financially. Your mom said they've done enough and you need to grow up. Grow up. The same parents who forged a narrative of my incompetence now painted themselves as victims of my imagined dependence. My chest tightened not from hurt, but from insult. And as if the universe wanted to twist the knife deeper, Chloe sent one more message. Chloe. Also, Lily's boutique? It's struggling, badly. Your parents said they're exploring funding options. I think they're planning something. Funding options. I knew exactly what that meant. In my family, funding options meant find someone to blame, find someone to use, find someone whose name could take the fall. And the person they always reached for was me, the daughter they belittled, the daughter they discredited, the daughter they privately depended on while publicly dismissing. I walked into my office and sat at my desk, fingers tapping slowly against the wood. They threw me out and immediately turned me into a tragedy. They humiliated me and immediately turned me into a burden. They rejected me and immediately turned me into something they could reuse. But this time, something in me hardened. A decision formed not loud, not dramatic, but cold and sharp like a blade forged in quiet fire. They wanted a story where I was the failure. They wanted a myth where they were the heroes. They wanted a world where I stayed small. But myths collapse, and lies unravel. 3 days after Thanksgiving, my parents rewrote my story. 3 weeks later, I would rewrite theirs. The Monday after Thanksgiving began like any other. Meetings stacked on my calendar, product updates to review, investor calls waiting. My world was moving fast, structured, alive. Nothing like the stagnant, suffocating version of me my parents liked to imagine. Around noon, I stepped out of a meeting and checked my inbox. That was the moment everything changed. A new email blinked at the top. Subject: verification required. Guarantor authorization. Urgent. From Sinclair and Weber Law Group. Guarantor? For what? Curiosity tugged at me, but when I clicked the message and saw the first line, the air left my lungs. This notice is to confirm your status as guarantor for the $480,000 renovation loan approved in 2021. I kept reading. Attached is the signed agreement, including your signature as financial guarantor. My signature. A cold whisper slid down my spine. I downloaded the file, opened the scan, zoomed in. There it was, Haley Monroe, written in a shape that tried to mimic mine but missed the rhythm. The strokes were wrong. The curve of the Y, the slope of the M. Someone had studied my signature but didn't understand it. They didn't need to understand it. They just needed it to look believable. My hands went numb. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't miscommunication. It wasn't oversight. It was forgery. By someone who had access to documents with my signature on record. Someone close. Someone who assumed I wouldn't fight back. I stared at the screen, pulse hammering, the taste of betrayal thick on my tongue. My parents wouldn't. Would they? No, actually. Yes. Yes, they would. They would absolutely use my name if it benefited Lily. I scrolled again. Use of funds, boutique expansion, Lily Monroe. The room spun for a moment. The boutique they bragged about. The boutique, they said Lily, built with her own talent. The boutique they used to praise her as the successful one was built on my name, my signature, my creditworthiness, without my knowledge, without my consent, without a single conversation. And now the loan was entering risk of default, meaning I would be legally pursued as the guarantor, meaning my assets could be targeted in recovery, meaning they had dragged me into a financial disaster. They architected and shielded Lily from responsibility entirely. I closed my laptop before I threw it. My breath came slow and deliberate. Not shaky, not panicked, controlled. Because this wasn't new. It was simply the first time I had proof. I dialed the number at the bottom of the email. A woman answered politely. I introduced myself. She confirmed the documents. Confirmed the signature on file. Confirmed the outstanding balance. Confirmed the risk of default. Her voice softened when she asked, "Do you believe your signature was used without consent?" A pause. Me, yes. She exhaled like she wasn't surprised. "It happens more often than you'd think," she said. "We'll send over everything you need to dispute it legally, but you should speak to your attorney as soon as possible." I ended the call and immediately dialed Daniel Briggs, my lawyer, the same one who handled my acquisitions and intellectual property filings. He picked up on the second ring. "Daniel. Haley, you sound not like yourself." "Me. Someone forged my signature on a $480,000 loan." A beat of silence. Sharp, heavy. "Daniel, send me everything, right now." Within 10 minutes, we were on a video call. Documents spread across both our screens. Daniel's brows knit together deeper and deeper as he clicked through each file. "Daniel, this wasn't sloppy. This was deliberate." "Me. I know who did it." "Daniel. Then you know this won't be easy." "Me. I'm not looking for easy." He studied me for a long moment, long enough to see the resolve settling in my eyes. "Daniel, are you prepared to escalate this fully, including criminal implications?" "Me. They've been rewriting my life for years. Now they've tried to write it in my name." "Yes, I'm ready." He nodded, voice steady. "Daniel, then we start tonight." And we did. While my parents were probably telling someone that I was lost or struggling, I was gathering evidence, screenshots, dates, handwriting discrepancies, financial trails. Every truth they buried was clawing its way to the surface. They thought they could use me again. They thought I was still the girl desperate for approval. They thought forging my name would be just another secret they could hide beneath a polished family photo. They had no idea who I had become. And they had no idea that this time, I wasn't walking away quietly. Over the next 2 days, Daniel and I unraveled the truth thread by thread, each discovery tightening something inside my chest. Not grief, not shock, but a quiet, rising determination. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that sharpens. By Wednesday morning, Daniel called again. I answered on the first ring. "Daniel. Haley, I've gone through everything. I need you to hear this clearly. What your parents did wasn't impulsive. It was coordinated." I didn't reply. I knew. "Daniel, the loan officers believed you had personally attended the signing. They were shown an ID. Someone practiced your signature. Someone rehearsed your mannerisms. This wasn't sloppy. They planned it." I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle not like a wound, but like armor. "Me. What happens now?" There was a long silence on his end. "Daniel, if the loan continues sliding, the lender will look for a financially stable guarantor to assume responsibility. If you take over the debt strategically, you can gain control of the asset tied to it." "Me. Control the boutique property?" "Daniel. Essentially, yes. Convert their manipulation into your leverage." I leaned back in my chair, the Austin skyline glowing behind me. My parents wanted me small. They wanted me powerless. They wanted me dependent. But their entire plan was built on one miscalculation. They thought I still needed them. "Me. What do you need from me?" "Daniel. Your decision." "Me. Do it." My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It settled, cold, certain. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't playing defense. We began immediately. Daniel drafted formal letters challenging the signature, a legal request for authentication records, and a preliminary alert to the lender about potential fraud. But alongside that, quietly, Discreetly, we initiated the process to position me as the acquiring party when the loan inevitably defaulted. While my parents lived in denial, we worked with precision, financial analysis, ownership structures, future sales scenarios, lease term options, exit calculations. Every document they forged became another piece of evidence strengthening my position. Oddly, I felt calm, almost eerily calm. Pain reacts, clarity plans, and I was done reacting. That night, while reviewing a spreadsheet of projected losses Lily's boutique had racked up, I caught myself whispering aloud, "You should have left me out of your mess." Because that was the truth. I hadn't asked for this. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't wanted anything from them, not money, not attention, not redemption. All I wanted was distance. But they built a bridge made of lies and expected me to carry their weight across it. Not this time. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Daniel, one more thing. The lender is concerned. They've already flagged the loan as unstable. It's slipping faster than expected. Meaning? Daniel, you could gain control sooner than we planned. I nodded, absorbing the shift. Good. The sooner this unravels, the better. He exhaled, maybe in relief, maybe in disbelief. Daniel, most people would be overwhelmed. You sound steady. Because I've lived through worse. They just hit it better. He didn't argue. After we hung up, I didn't pace or cry or rage. Instead, I walked to my balcony, letting the cold December air wash over my skin. Below me, the city pulsed cars, lights, possibility. Far away, in the place that once felt like home, my parents were probably asleep, believing the world still worked in their favor. Believing Lily would be saved. Believing the consequences they kept dodging would never catch them. They had no idea the ground beneath them was already shifting. Because while they spent years insisting I was the unstable one, the failure, the disappointment, I had become the one thing they never prepared for. Independent, informed, and in control. And if they thought the humiliation at Thanksgiving was the end of the story, they were about to learn what happens when the daughter they dismissed stops shrinking and starts standing. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, on a cold Friday morning, Daniel's name lit up my phone. I had been expecting the call, but when it finally came, the moment still felt heavier than I thought it would. I answered immediately. Daniel. Haley, it's official. The loan has defaulted. His voice held a weight that made the world pause. You now legally control the debt and everything attached to it. Everything. The boutique property, its lease, its assets, its future. My parents had pushed me out of their home 3 weeks ago. Today, I owned the foundation of theirs. I sat down slowly, letting the reality wash over me, not like triumph, but like oxygen. Move forward with the acquisition. Daniel. No hesitation? None. We spent the next 4 days drafting every document we needed. The formal notice of default, the assumption of debt, proposed repayment terms, exit options, a structured rental agreement, contingencies for voluntary sale, asset transfer clauses. Nothing was vengeful. Nothing was emotional. Everything was legal, clean, procedural, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries my parents had crossed so many times they forgot they existed. On Tuesday night, we finalized the paperwork. On Wednesday morning, Daniel filed everything, and by Thursday afternoon, the lender confirmed the transfer. I was the sole party in control. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter they had humiliated, the daughter they spoke of with embarrassment, the daughter they insisted was lost, now held their financial future in her hands. But the universe wasn't done yet. That evening, around 6:30 p.m., my phone buzzed again, this time with a name I didn't expect. Evan, Lily's boyfriend. I hesitated before answering. We weren't close, but he always treated me with a respect no one else in my family managed. Evan, what's wrong? His voice came out tight, urgent. Evan. Haley. I think your parents are in trouble. They got a notice from the lender this morning. They're panicking. Interesting. What did they think the notice meant? Evan. They believe the lender wants to negotiate before taking action. They think they still have time. They don't know it's you. A slow breath left my lungs. Of course they didn't know. My parents lived in a world where consequences belonged to other people. Me. How bad is it? Evan. Your mom is crying. Your dad is… quiet. Lily hasn't spoken all day. Haley. They're terrified. Terrified. It wasn't joy I felt. Not satisfaction. Not gloating. Just inevitability. Me. Evan, listen carefully. Tell them to meet me at Willow Ridge Restaurant. Friday, 7 p.m. He swallowed audibly. Evan. They think the lender will be there. Me. Good. Let them believe that. Another pause. Evan. Haley. Are you sure about this? Am I sure? 3 weeks ago, my father looked me in the eyes and told me to go live in the streets. 3 days later, they told people I was homeless. 2 years ago, they forged my signature. I was done feeling small. Done being rewritten. Done being useful only when they needed a shield. Me, I'm not trying to destroy them. I just won't let them destroy me. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the darkened window. My eyes didn't look angry. Or vengeful. Or vindictive. Just steady. For the first time in my life, everything was aligned. My truth. My power. My boundaries. My voice. Friday would not be revenge. It would be clarity. They had painted me as weak, helpless, unstable. But the truth was coming. And this time they would have to see me whether they wanted to or not. Willow Ridge was quieter than usual that Friday evening. A dim, elegant restaurant tucked behind a row of oak trees. The kind of place where secrets could be spoken without ever spilling. Daniel arrived before I did, seated at the private table we reserved for 6. The candlelight flickered across polished glasses, reflecting calm where I felt calculation. By 7:04 p.m., the door finally opened. My mother entered first, perfect hair, perfect lipstick, a perfect expression stretched too tightly across her face. My father walked behind her, shoulders stiff, eyes darting like he already sensed something was off. And Lily. Lily lingered in the doorway, eyes glossy, like she was bracing for a truth she wasn't ready to hear. No one said hello. No one acknowledged me. They sat down in silence, the clink of chairs against the floor the only greeting I received. My mother cleared her throat. Mother. Haley, we appreciate you arranging this meeting with the lender. We believe this entire situation is a misunderstanding. Actually, but a bit of Lober's. I folded my hands neatly in front of me. Me. Is that so? My father leaned forward, elbows on the table. Father, we're prepared to discuss solutions. The lender just needs to be reasonable. Daniel and I exchanged a glance. They still believed the world revolved around their comfort. Daniel placed a thick folder on the table and spoke calmly. Daniel. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, there is no misunderstanding. And I'm not the lender's attorney. My father frowned. My mother blinked rapidly. Father. Then why are you here? Daniel pushed the folder toward them. Daniel. Because Miss Monroe Haley is the acquiring party. She now controls the debt and every asset tied to it. Silence. Total, breathless silence. Lily's breath hitched. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father went pale and ashen color I had never seen on him before. Father. You bought our loan? His voice cracked on the last word. Why would you do that? I met his gaze without blinking. Me. Because you put my name on it. My mother shook her head violently. Mother. Haley, we only did it because Lily needed help. We thought you'd understand. My voice remained level. Me. Forging my signature is not help. Telling people I'm homeless is not concern. Humiliating me at Thanksgiving is not parenting. Lily suddenly slammed her palm on the table, her composure finally snapping. Lily. Why couldn't you just let it go? You have money. You don't need this. I turned to her slowly, studying the sister who had spent her life being protected from every consequence. Me. You're right. I don't need this. But I need my name. And you used it without permission. Her mouth opened, then closed, as if she was swallowing words she didn't want to face. Daniel slid another document forward. Daniel, you have 2 options. 1, sell the property and fully resolve the debt. 2, Miss Monroe assumes ownership, and you may remain as tenants under a structured rental contract. My father stared at the papers, horrified. Father, we have to rent our own building? Me. It isn't your building. Not anymore. My mother's composure splintered. Tears welled in her eyes, not remorseful tears, but fearful ones. Mother, We're your family. Haley, how can you do this to us? I leaned forward, voice steady as steel. Me. You taught me exactly how. The night you told me to go live in the streets, the years you pretended I was nothing, and the moment you forged my name because you assumed I'd never fight back. My father swallowed hard, his hands trembling. Father, what do you want from us? Me. Nothing. Not forgiveness. Not apologies. Just accountability. Lily looked at the documents again, eyes wide with disbelief. Lily, you're ruining everything. I shook my head slowly. Me. No. I'm ending what you started. Daniel closed the folder with a soft thud. Daniel, you have 7 days to decide. We recommend you start immediately. No one moved. No one fought. No one argued. The illusion of power they clung to for years had collapsed in a single evening. When they finally stood to leave, they looked smaller, fragile, almost. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father shuffled like he carried the weight of every choice he had made. Lily paused at the doorway, voice trembling. Lily, you could have helped me. I didn't soften. Not anymore. Me. I did. Just not the way you wanted. And as the door closed behind them, I realized something. This wasn't vengeance. This was closure. This was the moment I finally stepped out of the shadow of the family that never saw me and into the life I built for myself. The 7 days that followed were quieter than I expected. No screaming phone calls, no desperate messages, no attempts to twist the narrative. Just silence. Heavy, echoing silence. Daniel forwarded updates each morning. Clinical, cold, precise. Day 2, the Monroes requested additional documents. Day 4, they contacted a financial advisor. Day 5, they attempted to renegotiate with the lender but were rejected. Day 6, they asked about extensions, none were granted. And then, on the 7th day, at 9:12 a.m., the message arrived. They chose to sell the property. I stared at the email for a long moment, absorbing the finality of it. The building they'd poured their pride into, gone. The boutique they used to parade as Lily's achievement, lost. The image they'd curated for decades, fractured. The consequences they avoided for years had finally found them. Daniel called a few minutes later. Daniel, they made the right decision. Selling clears the debt entirely. Your name is formally released from every tie. Me. Good. There was no triumph in my voice. Just steadiness. Daniel. Haley, are you okay? I exhaled slowly. Me. I'm exactly where I need to be. He didn't push further. He didn't need to. 2 weeks later, Lily's boutique shut its doors for good. The announcement came through an online post, a soft pastel graphic with cursive text. Sometimes chapters close to make room for new beginnings. No mention of the loan. No hint of the forged signature. No sign of accountability. Just a curated ending to match the curated life she'd always lived. But the comments beneath the post told a different story. What happened? Is everything okay? Did the renovation fall through? I heard rumors about financial issues. The facade was cracking. Meanwhile, my parents withdrew from the social world they'd once dominated. No more brunches with church friends. No more holiday galas. No more polished family photos and matching outfits. Instead, they moved quietly into a smaller rental home across town. Not ruined. Not destitute. Just living within the boundaries reality finally enforced. Chloe texted me one afternoon. Chloe, they're different now. Just quiet. Your dad barely speaks. Your mom doesn't talk about the boutique anymore. Me. Are they angry? Chloe. I think they're scared. And maybe ashamed. Me. Ashamed of what they did? Chloe. Ashamed they got caught. I closed my eyes, letting those words settle. No apology was coming. No accountability beyond what the law demanded. No recognition of the damage they caused. And that, strangely, was the moment everything made sense. They hadn't failed as parents by accident. They failed because they believed they were incapable of being wrong. But I was done carrying the weight of their denial. One evening, as winter settled over Austin, I walked along the riverfront alone. The air was crisp, the city lights shimmering on the water. For the first time in a long time, my chest didn't feel tight. I felt free. Not because I won, not because their lives had crumbled, not because the debt was gone, but because I finally understood something I had ignored for years. Healing doesn't come from punishing the people who hurt you. Healing comes from choosing yourself after they do. My family's collapse wasn't my victory. My clarity was. They taught me to silence myself. I learned to speak. They taught me to shrink. I learned to stand. They taught me love was conditional. I learned love doesn't have to be earned. Walking along the water, I whispered into the cold air. You tried to define me. You tried to limit me. But you never knew me. The wind carried the words away, but the truth remained. The story they wrote about me had ended, and the one I was writing for myself was finally beginning. Winter settled slowly over Austin, softening the city's edges with cool air and early sunsets. My life, meanwhile, shifted into a stillness I had never known before. One without the constant background hum of trying to earn approval that was never mine to begin with. Work flourished. My teams thrived. My days filled with clarity instead of second-guessing. Yet the strangest part wasn't the success, it was the silence. A silence that no longer hurt. Some evenings, I'd stand on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching traffic move like a glowing river below. And I'd wonder, did my parents ever think about me? About what they said? About the signature they forged? About the story they told? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But their reflection was no longer my responsibility. A month after the confrontation, I received a message from Chloe. Chloe, just checking on you. Heard your parents are adjusting. Me? Adjusting? Chloe, yeah. Your dad works part-time at a hardware store. Your mom volunteers at the community center. They're quieter now. Softer, I think. I sat with that for a moment. Not angry, not vindicated, just reflective. Me. Are they okay? Chloe. They're surviving, but they're not the same people they were. Me. Maybe that's a good thing. Chloe. For them or for you? I smiled faintly. Me. Both. Because growth doesn't always look like success. Sometimes it looks like the collapse of illusion. My parents had spent their lives crafting a picture-perfect narrative, one that erased anything that didn't fit. Losing the boutique, losing the property, downsizing, it didn't destroy them. It humbled them. And humility, even late, is a beginning. But I wasn't waiting for them to change. I wasn't holding space for a reunion I no longer needed. Forgiveness wasn't the goal. Closure wasn't a door they needed to unlock. It was one I needed to walk through alone. I poured myself into things that mattered. I expanded one of my startups into a training program for young women in tech girls who reminded me of myself at 14, building code in secret, hoping someone would see the spark even if their families didn't. I took weekends off, something I'd never allowed myself before, and visited places I'd always postponed. A cabin in Colorado, a quiet lake outside Dallas, the art museum downtown. I surrounded myself with people who valued truth, kindness, accountability. People who didn't need me to shrink so they could shine. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. One night, sitting at my desk writing a proposal for a new AI tool, I paused and looked around my apartment. The plants I kept alive, the paintings I'd collected from local artists, the notes taped to my wall with ideas scribbled in messy cursive, and it hit me. This is the home I built. Not the one I fled, not the one that rejected me, the one I chose. My parents once told people I was homeless. In some ways, I had been, but not in the way they meant. I had been homeless inside their expectations, homeless inside a family that never made room for me, homeless inside a narrative where I could only be small. Now, I had a life with walls I built myself, a door I could close, a space where nothing needed to be proven. I whispered into the quiet, I'm home now. Months passed and I didn't see my parents. Maybe one day I will. Maybe we'll talk. Maybe we won't. Either way, I'm not waiting, because the opposite of rejection isn't acceptance. It's freedom. Freedom to define yourself without apology. Freedom to leave behind stories written by people who never learned your truth. Freedom to walk away and never look back, not in anger but in peace. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, my parents told me to go live in the streets. 3 months later, I was standing in a home filled with laughter, ambition, and quiet joy, the kind only built by someone who chooses themselves. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking permission. I was choosing peace.